You're watching Gamecock News Network.
I had the misfortune, I think, on Monday morning of being sick, and I was awake at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was on the Bloomberg news site, and it said that the Pope had resigned. And I said that this is a hoax. This is somebody who's broken into the Pope's Twitter feed or something and posted something. And so I contacted my friends who work at the Vatican, and they said they were just receiving the news and that it was true. Indeed, the Pope had resigned at about 10:30 in the morning Rome time, which was about 4:30 in the morning Alabama time. And this was just virtually unprecedented. This is something that had not happened for 600 years. So my friend at Vatican Radio said, are you ready to go on air and do an interview about this? So about 5 o'clock in the morning, I went on Vatican Radio with a couple facts in my hands, what I could glean from the books that I had at hand, and talked about 4 papal resignations in the past. The most recent one was 600 years ago. Just astonishing development in the Catholic Church for a Pope to resign. The normal thing is for the Pope to remain in office until he's dead, and so something very significant must have transpired to make Pope Benedict XVI take this very, very unusual step. The Pope has been very frail. For the people that we have records for, he's the 5th oldest Pope in history, and so that's quite a long time. He's nearing his 86th year, and this is an office which requires an immense amount of energy, an immense amount of pressure is on the person who holds this office. And so I do think it's definitely health related, and I think that with all of the issues facing the Church, that Pope Benedict knew that the Catholic Church needed someone that was strong at the helm to face these difficult issues. And he also wanted to prevent becoming a pawn of those who surround the offices of power. And so I think that he was fearful in the end that someone could use him and use his weakness, his bodily weakness, certainly not his mental weakness, because he's still very, very agile-minded, as a player, as a pawn for political gain. And so he wanted to eliminate that possibility. You know, it's astonishing when you look back at papal history. There is only one pope, I think, in the last 800 years that I could even point to signs that he might have been going senile. And he was a pope that was nearly 90 years old. For some reason, I guess the office makes you clear-headed, being that high up. So there haven't been. It's been more external political forces, like for instance when Napoleon kidnapped the Pope, rather than internal political forces. But that may have been the case this time. But I don't have any inside information on that. The Pope is absolute sovereign. He has full, immediate, ordinary jurisdiction in the Catholic Church, which means that he doesn't actually resign. The better word for this would be a renunciation or an abdication, like a royal abdication, because all he has to do, according to canon law, which is church law, is to freely manifest that he is going to resign, which is exactly what he did on Monday, to the cardinals of the Church, who will be in charge of the governance of the Church until a new pope is elected. He freely manifested that he is laying down his office at 8 p.m. on February 28th. And that's, as a Catholic pope, all you have to do. I don't think so. Lent is a very penitential season for Catholics. It's when Catholics give up things, give up meat, give up certain types of foods and delicacies. And I think it is related to that, certainly, why he wanted to do that during Lent, because he's renouncing the office like Catholics around the world renounce things during Lent. But I think it was also significant that he resigned on February 11th, which was the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, who's famous for healing miracles in Catholicism. It was also the World Day for the Sick, and so in order to show solidarity with people who are sick and suffering throughout the world, he did that. And also he did it in terms of a canonization consistory. It was when he was announcing the date for canonization for new saints. And some of the saints that are being canonized are those who were martyred by Muslims in the 15th century. And the Pope himself has attempted to dialogue with the Islamic world, attempted to call them to their tradition of rationality, and was met with a very violent response throughout the Islamic world, which was very unfortunate. And so I think perhaps there was some identification there between the martyrs that he was proposing to canonize and his date of resignation. Well, it is strange because most usually what you have is a period of 9 days of mourning and funerals for the Pope, and obviously we don't have that in this case. But the law does say, and the Vatican just reaffirmed this yesterday, that 15 days must elapse between the vacancy and the start of the conclave. And so for those 15 days, it's called a sede vacante, a vacant seat. And so the cardinals of the Catholic Church together, sort of like a senate, run the ordinary day-to-day affairs. They can't undertake any serious decisions without a new pope. And within 15 days, 15 to 20 days, they will assemble the cardinals that are permitted to elect the pope. And there's 117 who are under 80 from all over the world, from every continent, who will gather, and they will be locked in the Sistine Chapel, and they can't come out until they come up with a new pope. And this has been the tradition now for 9 centuries. The cardinals would be the electors of the pope. Not at all. I mean, the tradition of secrecy is absolute, and in fact, the cardinals have all of their electronic devices confiscated at the door. And so you can imagine that they go in there without their phones and without their iPads. And if anyone, the cardinals or anyone within the conclave, leaks information, they are subject to instant excommunication from the church. And so it's pretty serious. They're not going to change any of that for this. What I'll be doing when I get there, because of my contacts in the Vatican, I'll be serving as a historical correspondent, helping out Vatican Radio and Zenit, which is a news organization that's run out of Rome. And also, I'm trying to work on getting a press pass through Crisis Magazine, so that'll give me even better access there. And so I'll be corresponding and updating people and writing articles and generally covering the conclave, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I mean, I'm really privileged to be able to do that. The new Pope-elect themselves are allowed to choose their names, and they choose something that is going to be very personally meaningful for them. Like, for instance, the current Holy Father, Benedict. He chose the name Benedict because of Saint Benedict, first of all, who was the father of Western monasticism and is one of the patrons of Europe. And the current Holy Father feels very much obliged to trying to recall Europe to its deepest Christian roots, to its Christian values. And so he took Benedict's name in honor of that. But also because of previous popes who have been named Benedict. Benedict XIV in the 18th century was one of the most learned of all popes. And this current pope is a theologian and a famous professor long before he became pope. And so in honor of Benedict XIV, he chose the name as well. But also because of Benedict XV, who was the Catholic pope during World War I and was constantly trying to call all of the parties to peace. And so he's really a pope of peace. And so for all of those reasons, all of those echoes throughout church history, names get chosen. And so Benedict, the next pope could be Leo XIV, or could be Gregory XVII. We don't know. I mean, but they'll choose it in order to try and recall something that they want to make a theme of their pontificate, I think. This is sort of the question of the hour. Nobody knows what to expect in a situation like this. What do you do with an ex-pope? And all these questions are on the table. Now, it would seem to me, and there's multiple different opinions on this, that Benedict XVI is a regnal name, and so it would cease to be used when the Pope is not reigning anymore, and so he would go back to Joseph Ratzinger. Now, he is a bishop. You stay a bishop forever, no matter what. Whether he'll stay a cardinal, that's not clear. But what is clear, I think, is that he is going to go into retirement, sort of a semi-monastic situation. And what I think his role will be is certainly a life of quiet solitude, but also writing. I think that because he's got the professor so deeply embedded within him, he's going to continue to write and continue to think, but not going to release anything during his lifetime. It'll be released after his death, so as not to take the thunder from the new pope. But I also think, and this is where I think the big advantage for this move might be, he will be able to serve as a living advisor to the new pope, a private advisor and counselor. Every pope, in a certain sense, has to start from scratch. All right, the previous pope is dead, and they have to learn the ropes, and sometimes it takes weeks, months, years to try and figure out the machinations of a 2,000-year-old institution. And the new pope will be able to really hit the ground running. He'll be able to call up Benedict and say, well, what do you think about this person? What do you think about this department? And I think that'll be a massive advantage. I couldn't think of a greater advantage as a new pope than to have a former pope advisor. And so I think that's something that's been underemphasized in all of this, the advantage that it will prove to the church through this really orderly transition that I think is going to take place. This is revolutionary and precedent setting. I mean, they're going to have to see what happens with this one, I think, to see whether popes in the future will feel inclined to resign. Now, he set a pattern. I mean, it's possible that in the future, and this could be a pattern for bad and a pattern for good. I mean, you could have people with the next pope saying, well, don't you think you're getting too old? You need to retire now. And that could start to drown out any sort of normal semblance of life in the church, and that's problematic. But otherwise, if a pope in the future truly feels unfit to his office, then I think certainly that this could provide a more easy precedent for new popes to do that. So it's a double-edged sword. We're going to have to see how this one goes. Usually the pattern in the past has been young pope, old pope, young pope, old pope. And it's often the old popes that make the most waves. It's sort of funny. I mean, it was John the 23rd, who they thought was only going to reign for a couple of years, who called the Second Vatican Council. And so I think they will bias towards younger, and that's relative, right? I mean, it's going to be somebody at least 55, 60 years old at the bare minimum, because you need some serious experience for an office, running a church of 1 billion plus people, not to mention being the head of a state, of your own nation. And I think that age is not necessarily the qualifier, because you saw somebody like John Paul II, who even in his 60s, 70s, and even 80s really did connect with young people very, very strongly. So I don't think that's necessarily it. But someone who is media savvy, I think, would be very good. Somebody who knows the new media, who knows social media. The Vatican's been trying to work on this over the last couple of years. And so definitely somebody younger. The question is, could a pope come from the third world? And that's definitely the case. There are many, many cardinals from the third world. The church is growing by leaps and bounds in places like Africa and Asia, while traditional bastions like Latin America and Europe are definitely on the decline. And so that's the question. Pope Benedict was really dedicated to the revitalization of Christianity in the old world, as it were, in Europe. But the question is, when is that ship going to sail? Because the church in Africa especially is very, very fruitful. And so I think there is a strong possibility that you could see an African pope coming out of this conclave. I wouldn't be as surprised that in the Catholic Church, you don't want to impose sort of an American idea of racial harmony on the church, because the church has always been very heterogeneous, I should say, incorporating people from all over the world. And so it wouldn't be a shock in that sense. What would be a shock is the power balance shift from the old world, especially Europe, towards the new world. Probably somewhat of a chance of a Latin American cardinal, but I think it's even money that the new pope could be European as well. Won't be American, sorry. The American church wields too much influence already, and I think the rest of the church feels that, especially monetarily, and they wouldn't want to sort of put all their eggs in one basket. Though I think Cardinal Dolan is a very media savvy person, and is going to be somebody that's going to be quite significant in the church in the future. Some people often have a question about, what's all the fuss about? Why all the hubbub about this? And so it's important maybe to illustrate what Catholics think about the Pope. For Catholics, Catholics have been a very hierarchical church that's controlled from the top down. It's not sort of the congregational model or the denominational model that you find so much in America. It's very much a unity of prayer, a unity of belief, a unity of worship that starts with the Pope. And for Catholics, that idea comes from Matthew 16:18, where Christ gives the keys of the kingdom to St. Peter. You are Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church. And so from the very beginning, Christians have clustered around the Bishop of Rome. And so the election for a Bishop of Rome has always been a matter of supreme importance for the church. And for the first millennium, it was the clergy of Rome that elected the Pope. It was the people in the city, the priests of the city, that elected the Pope. And then people said, this is such an important office. Shouldn't the whole of the church be consulted when this important event takes place? And that's where the office of cardinals came from. What happens is, if somebody gets named cardinal, like Cardinal Dolan, when he became Archbishop of New York and the Pope made him a cardinal, what happened was he was given a parish church in the city of Rome. And so he technically became a member of the Roman clergy. And so as the Roman clergy, even though he's Archbishop of New York, he has a church in Rome. And because of his church in Rome, he's entitled to be among the electors for the new Pope. And because it's an event that affects the whole world, you're going to have cardinals from Latin America, from Australia, from India, from Africa, coming together in a truly international format to elect the new Pope, who is in the Catholic view, the vicar of Christ. And not Christ. It's important to note Catholics don't worship the Pope. The Pope is sort of like a caretaker for Christ. But he is the visible symbol of unity.